Random loot drops, endless crafting, RPG elements like multiple classes with skill trees that are impossible to fully max out, bosses that are crushingly difficult to defeat even with superhuman real-time coordination, running the same dungeons over and over and over again to grind experience points to earn marginally better equipment. If this sounds like a completionist nightmare, you might be surprised to learn how wrong you are. Diablo II is a game that, given the chance, I will always be down not just to play, but to complete. Completing it is like riding a bike. Once you've done it, you'll never forget how. Talking about it with anyone for any length of time gets me hyped to plunge into the depths of hell all over again. It may be over 20 years old at this point, but it still holds the hell up. Pun absolutely intended. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Completionist New Game Plus, the show where I am recompleting the first 120 games I ever featured here on the channel. More on that in the box down below. And hey, if you like the show, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, like this video, watch the whole thing, give us your first newborn child, and remember, we are awesome YouTubers. Diablo 2 is an incredible special game to me. No matter what, no matter when, I am inexplicably drawn to complete this game every time I start talking about it. It's also one I poured hundreds of hours into playing, and then a few hundred more into recompleting just before the lockdown started in the US last winter. And when the announcement came out of nowhere that a remake/remaster was coming out, I knew that I had to get this episode out the door, otherwise I would have wasted hundreds of hours again with all of the awesome fans out there who helped me complete this game. So with that said, guys, get your Smite builds on, because we're about to recomplete Diablo 2, Lords of Destruction. Let's begin. In ancient times, a forgotten history before widespread internet use, in the year 1997, Diablo sprang forth. This hack-and-slash game pioneered a genre and even launched Battle.net to let people play together online. The RPG had that signature addictive Blizzard feel to it, but there was the potential for more. Diablo did well, but there was untapped potential. Only a few years later, in the summer of 2000, Diablo 2 emerged. The game took everything that its predecessor did and did it bigger and better. More classes, more levels, more bosses, more loot, and more ways to play. Diablo 2 may have more of everything that made the first game a hit, but it's also more than the sum of its parts. It is the definition of a sequel that perfected the ideas of its progenitor. It marries its dark aesthetic with gameplay in a natural extension of the franchise. And as a sequel, it's instantly intriguing. In fact, intrigue is high from the very beginning. At the end of the very first game, the demon Diablo was defeated and his essence contained in a human body on the mortal plane. But Diablo is a prime evil, a powerful demonic presence, and soon corrupts his host and everything in the area. Evil is on the rise once more as Diablo is able to break free of the soul stone that shackles him. He sets out to liberate his other primeval brothers, Mephisto and Baal, to devastate the world. Now there's a bunch of other lore and history stuff going on here, but honestly, the only thing that's important is that Diablo, the Lord of Terror, is coming back. And you know what? We're not going to stand for that. Okay, a little bit of Gerard lore right now. As a kid, my brother Jacques and I visited Lebanon with my dad, and we bought one of the very first gaming laptops just to play Diablo 1 and have something to do as we were overseas for months. But before we left, Diablo 2 came out, so we brought that with us. I was obsessed with that game, so when the sequel hit, I got into it at the absolute perfect time to be completely enveloped. The internet felt like it was finally becoming widespread, and things like message boards were coming into popularity. This game, combined with the burgeoning internet and trading tips with friends who were also hooked, took my world by storm. Minus a few added bells and whistles, the experience of playing Diablo 2 is pretty similar to playing the first game. Players choose a class, and from there, it's out into the isometric perspective world to click your way to glory. Players kill thousands of enemies to earn experience points and level up and choose skills. And you don't have to do it alone. I played through most of this game with a group of friends via the revolutionary Battle.net. It's how I completed this game the first time around with a rotating crew of several of my closest friends. Playing Diablo 2 is one thing, but completing it by yourself is impossible and not fun. My first episode about Diablo 2 was 11 months in the making, having a grand old time, all of us together, but how I completed this game originally is not how I went about it this time around. I have this insatiable need to max my level of characters whenever I play an RPG. So one of the reasons my first completionist video on Diablo 2 took me and those who played with me a combined total of 1,200 hours was that I took one of my characters all the way to level 99 just to see if it would get me anything. And you know what? It doesn't. So this time, I didn't even put that on the checklist. Aside from the max leveling, I wanted to recomplete this game in a manner as close as possible to my original experience, but with a new team and all the knowledge I have acquired over the years. But there's still plenty to be done here, without even max leveling. That meant beating all of the main acts and bosses, including the expansion pack known as Diablo II Lords of Destruction, which focuses heavily around Baal and the barbarian homeworld. And of course, the added Uber Diablo and the infamous Pandemonium event, where I'll face Uber versions of all of the primevals. And yes, no playthrough of Diablo 2 is complete without the madness of the secret cow level. Some things may be different, such as the PC I played on originally versus the monster I'm playing it on right now. I originally gave Diablo 2 a finish it because of the grind required, but it wasn't out of frustration. Now look, if I sound crazy hype about Diablo 2, it's because I am f***ing crazy hype about Diablo 2. Hell, I even participated in Hardcore, the show, over on PBG's gameplay channel because I sincerely can't stop playing this game. Diablo is one of those properties that I feel like I can't always be passionate about because it's not super on brand for me here on the channel. But guess what? StarCraft and Diablo 2 are some of my favorite gaming experiences I've ever had, and I never talk about them on the channel. It's sometimes tough to like a Blizzard game because of, well, you know, current day Blizzard. But Diablo 2 is utterly and sincerely one of my favorite games of all time. I just want to play Diablo 2 with the homies any chance I get. Fortunately, I always have the chance because Diablo 2 is my kryptonite. I've completed this game on my own volition something like 7 times just for fun. A game this lengthy, complicated, and just plain difficult shouldn't scream out, complete me at every step. And yet, it does. From the opening acts to the Uber versions of the bosses, Diablo 2 is just as compelling to recomplete as it is to complete the first time around. At its core, Diablo 2 is about that grind. The grind of accruing knowledge, the grind of finding loot for your characters in certain builds, the grind for special items that let me reach secret areas otherwise inaccessible. Now, it's easier than ever to know what to do and where to go based on the Diablo community and, well, you know, the internet. The game offers a ton of flexibility by letting players develop builds for whatever class they choose to specialize and play. Rather than just pick a class and spend their time looking at the strongest loot in the game, the player must build out their skill trees and develop a strategy. Because clearing the game is one thing, but defeating Uber Diablo and his scary brothers requires another. Even though I've played it before, I'm always shocked at the amount of things there are to try in Diablo 2. Every class has its uses. The Necromancer can summon abilities to absorb and deal death, the Sorceress can nuke everything around her with elemental damage, and the Amazon can somehow shoot like 30 arrows at the same time. During the course of playing the game over and over, I loved learning the limits of how effective a class and specialization could be. No matter where you are in terms of expertise, this game compels players to keep experimenting. There is a near endless amount of depth that can seem overwhelming to newcomers, but even lapsed players can dive into a new game like it's no big deal. Say you've exclusively only messed around with the Sorceress in the past, but you want to see what the dual-wielding Barbarian has to offer. Do you have to completely relearn how to play the game? Not really. It all starts with your first few choices of what skills and points you invest in. Just this one character has several different popular builds, all different ways to deal huge physical damage. After focusing on specific skills, you'll quickly realize what your character is useful for, and with that, how they can best fit into the group that you're working with. You might still be performing the same basic mechanics, left-clicking and right-clicking in equal measure, but the results are unique to your build. It's easy to get sucked back into the loop of Diablo 2, but the depth of the game's mechanics is revealed over the course of multiple playthroughs. Diablo 2 limits what players can do in a given run, and as a result, over the years, I've experimented with builds and characters in just about every possible way because it's so fun to do so. But For completionists who want to wreck that post-game, I am going to go with my favorite particular build, especially suited for doing so. Pointing and clicking through the base game and the expansion via the 5 acts isn't the most difficult thing in the world to do, especially on normal mode. It's actually completely possible to just solo the game, taking on Diablo and his brothers entirely by yourself on the easiest difficulty. Now, I loved playing the game by myself when I was younger. Blizzard's art design is second to none, and Diablo 2's combination of fantasy and horror sparked something in me at a young age. But high-level play means you pretty much have to play multiplayer, and that's where Battle.net comes in. For most people, finishing the story is just the beginning. The unlocked difficulty modes are Nightmare and Hell, and they're significantly more difficult. They're essentially New Game Plus options where players can bring their characters from previous playthroughs over. So gear and stats persist. I was able to do several playthroughs of this whole game with a select group of people from my Twitch chat, and to me, playing with a large group of people, that's the best way to play it. Every time we finished an act, we just wanted to keep rolling through to the next one to see just how far we could get. Now, I said it earlier, but I need to reiterate this. It's easier to grind and farm for loot with a group than by yourself, but I still want to be able to do so if I couldn't get my group together. So the build that I spent the bulk of my time with had to be useful in a group and solo play. That's why I went with my old-time classic favorite, the Smiteadin, a paladin build that smashes everything in the way of using a shield as my main weapon. The way I play it, I'm tanky enough to stand up to the toughest enemies and strong enough to wreck basic enemies in one hit. And with the right build, I was even able to restore my health as I attacked, with certain items invoking life leech very often. Now, I've been perfecting my own personal build for years, and it carried me through my own original video. And this build is famous and one that people use all the time. I'm happy to say that even years later, I was able to complete this game again largely using those same tactics. Truthfully though, my favorite class to play is the Barbarian. I love that big strong man, the war cries are objectively cooler than auras, but for this playthrough, I needed to be able to do the solo tank thing just in case. And there's nothing better for solo tanking than a paladin. And see, that's part of the allure of completing Diablo 2. It's comforting to build out a skill tree, even though it's something I've done many times before. Communicating with a group of friends in multiplayer to see how we all play together is always a delight. Developing strategies and seeing what builds other people are using brings out a nostalgic charm that reminds me of high school days. Visiting forums and scouring the internet now to find the best strategies still gets me very excited as it did years ago. Playing and completing this game instantly takes me back to how I felt even before my original video came out. So once I started playing, I know I was in it for the long haul. And going back to Diablo 2, I'm struck again by how each area is so compelling. When the game first came out, fans didn't love the desert areas because they were so different from the goth castles and dungeons from Diablo 1. But I love how every area in each act feels different from the next. For me, the desert sands of Act 2 always remind me of Arabian Nights, if Arabian Nights had gigantic gross-ass bugs. There's always something to love and something to hate. I love that even after so much playtime, there are elements of Diablo 2 that make me feel uncomfortable. This game makes me feel things and somehow feels fresh after dozens of times. Ask anyone who's played it at the time. Diablo 2 is video game history. One of my favorite things about completing Diablo 2 again is playing through the Secret Cow level, a self-referential secret area that Blizzard created purely to troll fans. It's awesome, and before the Lord of Destruction expansion dropped, this area was one of the best ways to grind for experience points, as long as you didn't kill the Cow King. It's a great gaming joke, paying off a setup from all the way back in Diablo 1 and StarCraft cheat codes. I desperately hope that Diablo 2 Resurrection keeps this area intact, and the convoluted ways players reach it exactly the same. You can't get to the Secret Cow level without transmuting a few specific items in the Herodric Cube and opening a portal. In fact, most of Diablo 2's secrets are tied to the use of the Herodric Cube. Just one more way I was intrigued to keep on trying stuff. Sure, these days I've got pretty much all the recipes memorized, but part of the mystery and spooky fun is using this strange alchemic box to turn things into other things. Messing around, attempting to improve items by shoving them into a box with some weird body parts and gems. It's like opening up a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. Well, I do. In this case, it's the entrance to the cow level, so bring on the Cow King. It's time to farm the experience. As long as none of you kill him. Stop killing the Cow King! But what is there to do after perfecting your build and finding the best equipment for your class? Well, of course, there is the one ultimate challenge, even beyond that of the secret cow level, something that was added to Diablo 2 years after its release, because this game was still going so strong. It's one more reason to get sucked into it even more, another compelling way to just keep on playing. I love that Blizzard gave the diehard Diablo 2 fans something else to do besides just run the base game over and over again. The post-game stuff is wild, and one of my favorite challenges to ever overcome. First things first, to even attempt to get the insanely difficult post-game quest, there's a crazy complicated series of steps to take. Step 1, farm keys. Specific items that can only drop in certain areas. I needed one each of the Key of Terror, the Key of Hate, and the Key of Destruction. Even finding these keys took a long time because they're not guaranteed to drop just because I defeated the enemies I needed to defeat. I had to be in a specific place to kill certain enemies, just for the chance to get the keys I needed. It sounds complex even now, but back in the day, these keys were an absolute mystery as to what they actually did. Talking with anyone about Diablo 2, the conversation would eventually turn to a discussion of what the hell the use case of these items was. Of course, now it's as simple as looking up a guide, but I'll always fondly remember the sense of urgency and fun of figuring out for ourselves how to use these 3 keys. Part of the mesmerizing nature of returning to Diablo 2 over the years has been that aching need to discover how things interact with each other. Once I had one of each key, I placed them in the Haradra Cube during Act 5 to open a portal. These portals open up one of 3 random levels with a really difficult boss that drops another special item. I had to open this portal multiple times to defeat all of the bosses that would spawn to collect 3 more special items: Diablo's Horn, Baal's Eye, and Mephisto's Brain. All of these bosses have to be defeated in one run, basically back to back. Then, once I'd collected the demon's grisly body parts, I could transmute them all again to create yet another portal. And this is the thing that leads to the ultimate challenge, Uber Tristram. Basically a main area that players are used to, but full of horrifyingly powerful enemies and bosses. This is the true final challenge of Diablo 2. Taking on the Ubers, as they're commonly referred to, requires a team of straight up baddies working in total sync with each other. There are more enemies on screen than can be believed, and if you're not communicating well with your teammates, your entire party will be wiped out in seconds, meaning all of that hard work and grinding for keys and organs and whatnot was for nothing. I live for this. Building up a character from nothing and then building them to take down the Uber bosses is a thrill like no other, and I have to thank everyone who helped me on my most recent run. Diablo 2 never ceases to get me totally hyped from level 1. Building out my character and selecting my skills is a ritual that I've gladly participated in for over 2 decades. And I know I'll do it again. When Resurrected comes out, playing with a group of friends and overcoming the toughest challenges this game has to offer is one of the most positive collaborative experiences I've ever had, both in my original video and in this iteration. I will always come back to Diablo 2, even though its highest rewards are reserved for completionists with the group. There's a lizard brain satisfaction in playing Diablo 2. Finding loot and clicking through battles will always feel good, especially when that entire experience is randomized every time you play the game online. And for those of you who have run this game dozens or even hundreds of times, the Pandemonium event is the ultimate challenge. Unlocking and beating this is the most punishing thing that Diablo 2 has to offer, and the rewards are proof that you're at the top of your game if you do so. The loot is satisfying, but the best thing about it is that it helps the loop continue on. The reward for defeating the Ubers is the Hellfire's Torch, an extremely powerful and useful charm. In terms of rewards, it's the most useful thing this game has to offer. It provides stat bonuses and resistances, and even the chance to offer one of Diablo himself's powerful attacks. It rules, and I loved being able to use it for future runs to grind even more and help other players achieve what I have. For a game that's all about the grind, I didn't mind that the reward was something to help ease future grinds. Though since Diablo 2 exists before even the dawn of the achievement age, that meant this game doesn't really keep track of the heights I've achieved. I have my most powerful loot, and my character has evidence of all that I've done. But at the end of the day, only me and my fellow adventurers know what we accomplished together. We battled the ultimate evil and emerged victorious, and that will always satisfy me. Recompleting this game just before the pandemic hit had quietly been one of my favorite experiences. Diablo 2 was made with multiplayer in mind. And honestly, the only reason why I'm putting this video out now, instead of after I've completed the recently announced Diablo 2 Resurrected, is because I didn't want to waste the hundreds of hours of time that fans and friends helped me put into completing this game for New Game Plus. The community around Diablo 2 made this game to what it is today, and there's a reason people still play it 20 years later and even prefer it over Diablo 3. God help me, I will 100% complete that remaster, given half a chance. Diablo 2 revolutionized what playing together meant for the world, and opened my eyes to a game whose siren song I can never resist. When I recompleted Diablo 2 Lords of Destruction, there were hundreds of items transmuted in the Horadric Cube, and hot damn, I love the word Horadric. 5 acts completed, over and over and over again. 42 deaths. 244 individual times in which I was farming for experience and or farming for keys in order to be the best that I can be. 65 hours of total playtime, and 7 friends who soldiered on with me, who helped me grind out the toughest stuff together. Shoutouts to Gemcat, Jellies, Crazy Person 23, Yui, Blade Vancer, Marigue, and Super Dave, for memories that I'll always have. Let's do this again when Resurrected drops. Evil persists throughout generations, but so do badasses who fight it. You know, I don't get the chance to talk about my obsession with Diablo 2 very much, mostly because Blizzard is kind of a taboo name to say nowadays, even though I love Blizzard games. Completing Diablo 2 truly is one of my most treasured experiences. Every time I start talking about this game with a friend or a fan or a coworker, I have to fight myself to try not to complete it again and again. It's a high that I constantly chase. But the thing is, if you're playing by yourself, it's not that fun. And the only way to really play this game is online via closed BattleNet with hopefully some friends. It's very exciting that we're getting a remaster/remake in today's current era. And I hope that fans of the old game will still be there to this day and hopefully beyond, playing it again and again as good old Diablo intended. So, with that in mind, guys, I still give this game its completionist rating of finish it.
Finish it!